I want to welcome you to Sly Media TV, welcome you to this special edition of our program where we have a roundtable discussion on issues pertaining to the by-elections that were held in the country on 26 March. And we are doing so as we are looking into 2023 to say what lessons can we draw from the by-elections, and also to look or zero down on the role that the media plays in so far as coverage of elections is concerned. Is there fair coverage? We are going to have responses to the panelists that I'm having on the show, and I'm going to be introducing the panelists that I have on the show this morning. We have Patience Zirima from Media Monitors. Patience, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And we also have Ostallos Gift Siziba. He is from the CCC. Welcome to the program, and welcome to Sly Media.
Thank you very much, my brother.
We have on my near right here Goodson Nguni. Goodson Nguni represents an organization called Fongo. And let me welcome you to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Once again, let me say thank you to our partners, the Media Center, who made this program possible. And let me also say to our viewers, you are free to send in your questions, your comments to the panelists that I have on the show this morning. And I'm going to be reading those questions to them to give them an opportunity also to respond to the questions that are coming from you. Let me go straight into the questions, and I'll start with you, Patience, to say that we want to look at your view in terms of the manner in which different media platforms, including social media, even covered the by-elections in the weekend.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the program, and I think that's a very interesting question. When we look at how the media fared in covering the elections, the run-up to the elections and the election itself, it was actually a very interesting time as we have been monitoring the media for the past 20 years or so. And we've realized for this election, even if it was a by-election, there was a lot of hype that came with these elections from the media. But we also realized that, unlike past elections, it actually felt like a national election, where we found that there was a lot of reporting that was there of the political parties and the party presidents themselves, as well as spokespersons of the political parties. We saw them featuring very prominently. And you would have thought, you wouldn't have realized that this was an election that was actually looking at the National Assembly or electing people to the National Assembly and to council, because there was very little coverage of candidates themselves and local government candidates as well, especially if you compare that to the party leaders who took up a lot of space. What this meant, I think, for citizens, and what we saw, was that there was very little that we knew about the different candidates as we're getting into the election. Very little around what were the constituencies that would be contested for, what were the issues in the elections themselves, beyond the campaigns that were being done by by the party leaders themselves. So it was actually a very interesting election, but overall, without that much information on the actual election itself and what was happening on the day, what were the issues. And we also did see quite a lot of reportage on the Electoral Commission and how the Electoral Commission was running the election. Whichever way you looked at was being reported, but there was a lot of reporting that was being done by the media on the nature of election administration in the country. So those pretty much were the overall trends in terms of how the elections were being covered by the media this time around.
And let me come to you, Ostallos, to say from the lenses of a political party or political party as participants in the election, how would you characterize the coverage of the media in the past election?
I think that from our perspective, I think that we received fair coverage from the private media in Zimbabwe. something which I think that would appreciate, even if whether it was putting a positive or negative image, but I think that we had a fair share of us getting the right to response, and coverage of our political programs, and also coverage of the issues that we intended to represent. And more importantly, I think that our rallies had fair coverage from the private media. I think that we didn't get coverage from state media, which is very unfortunate, because in our view, in our respectful view, which is informed by the constitutional mandate of state media, which receives funding from taxpayers, which we are part and parcel of, has got a constitutional mandate to give fair coverage. It was very unfortunate that we didn't get coverage as an alternative from the state media, and also from Zim papers, which receives state funding and has got a constitutional obligation to cover all political parties, irregardless of how big or small they are. And I think that is a universal complaint by other political parties outside ZANU-PF. It's obvious and was clear that you would find ZANU-PF coverage of life in terms of their rallies, in terms of their political programs, predominantly the entire part of the day. So something that is very unfortunate. We engaged the Electoral Commission because of also its mandate in terms of regulating the state media in terms of providing coverage, but to no avail. The only time we had coverage from ZBC was a coverage for one of our members of parliament, Childon Wende, in Kwadzana, and the audio was deliberately on mute to the level and extent that it facilitated further perpetuation of propaganda against and embedded partisan coverage of our political program, which is very unfortunate. But as I've said, that we also obviously as an alternative find platforms and methods around which we're able to put our narrative out there, in particular through the use of social media platforms, which majority of Zimbabwean people have got access to in a way to be able to articulate and sell our alternative agenda for transformation.
So your engagement with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, your complaints that you put forward, what was the resolution? What was the reasons why you were not receiving that coverage?
I think that the right answer would come from ZEC, because we never got a response from ZEC, and it's part and parcel of ZEC's failure in terms of the insincerity test that we had said is part and parcel of our engagement in the by-election, to find out to what extent is the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission committed and sincere in terms of executing its constitutional mandate. The only response we got from ZEC was on other issues that we raised, and in fact, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has gone ahead to say that they actually didn't get any complaints from us, which is not true, because we've got copies of the letter that were received by the commission, and part of the signal complaints we put was issue of unfair coverage by the state media, which we thought ZEC was supposed to act on. Okay,
we are going to talk about that later, but let me bring in Goodson. Goodson, from the lenses of non-governmental organization, you lead a federation of non-governmental organizations, and from your lenses, when you look at the way the media covered the past election, the by-election, how would you characterize it?
I think what my sister said as a media monitor was more to the point, that the media, it is up to the editorial policy of the actual media to determine what is newsworthy. If other political parties don't have anything that is newsworthy, or being a repetition of what was being said the previous day and the previous day, the editor may decide that it's not newsworthy.
But before you continue, I'll allow you to continue, but I want to say his point is that, for instance, ZANU-PF rallies were being covered by the state, by state media, yet their rallies were not covered by the state media.
Yeah, I was not actually focusing on him. I was going to make a general statement, and I was going to cover that as well.
All right.
First of all, it is important for the people to understand that in Britain, America, and other countries, newspapers support different political agendas. The Mirror supports the Labour in Britain, the Sun supports the Conservative. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Secondly, the idea that a political party needs a positive media coverage for them to win an election is not wrong. I support ZANU-PF. I'm a member of ZANU-PF, even though I have a non-state actor organization. I don't need the media to articulate the views that I want or that I'm going to use when I'm voting. There's no role for the media because there are other ways of communicating to people the political agenda. But people want to use the mere fact that state media may support government ministers or support or cover the state president. That's how it is. When Biden goes to anywhere he goes in the world, it makes headline news on all media in America because he's the president of the United States. In Britain, the same story. Now, this argument that is being brought about that we put in a constitution that state media must actually cover all political parties. There are more than 50 political parties in Zimbabwe. So how does an editor in a state media decide?
But the law does say that every political party must have equal time in terms of coverage.
No, it doesn't say that. It says there must just be fair coverage, full stop. It doesn't say there must be equal time. It can't say when, it can't tell the editor, Constitution can't tell the editors that don't cover the president because because otherwise you must also go and cover the president of MDC Alliance. It doesn't say that. But people who wanted to use the media against ZANU-PF, they created a private media that was supporting the opposition. Now they wanted to control the state media so that ZANU-PF has no media at all.
But is it fair then that the state media just covers ZANU-PF and doesn't cover other political parties?
It's not very true. On the radios, I was hearing political components from media, MDC Alliance, MDCT, and also I had Charlton Wende, Lynette Kanyeri, and a host of other MDC, Triple C candidates being interviewed. You must not forget that the Triple C themselves also have a very bad public relations with state media. They chase them. They've been beaten up. They've chased them. It has been widely reported in the media. Okay. And whenever they call them to say an interview, they say, no, we don't talk to you. We talk to other media, not yourself. That's a fact.
Okay. The good thing is Ostallos
is here. Yeah.
And there it is, Ostallos. You chase the media. You don't want the media to cover you. Why do you do that?
I think that with great respect, I know that he belongs to a political party, but I think that his submissions, in my view, are very limited in terms of the role of media, in particular in a space where we are a constitutional democracy. We gave the mandate to state media to do and give fair coverage to political organizations, not to those who are holding political power in this country. It's very unfortunate that for someone who has experience in media to give such submission in front of the entire world, because the state media has got a mandate by virtue of them collecting money and surviving on the basis of taxpayers' money. We are part and parcel of taxpayers. Tax paying does not include members of ZANU-PF alone, and I don't think that it's very unfortunate that ZANU uses America and the West when it suits them, and when in terms of an agenda that they believe is good, and when it doesn't, the West are for the opposition are the puppets and some warped political submissions. I'm giving submissions that are not based on assumptions. The assumption again that even in Western countries the media is biased is a predominant assumption by people. There is no editorial mandate in anywhere in the world where you go to South Africa and the SABC is said to be a media outlet for ANC or for the economic freedom fighters or the Democratic Alliance. The editorial policy talks about fair coverage, and I don't think that there is a media in the world that is said, yes, people can make their own conclusions that you are pro this or you are pro this, but there is no media outlet, a legitimate media outlet. And I want to respond on the last question around us not covering. We've said it publicly, and you know that. I've met extend information disseminated to state media that, look, we have actually gone further and say we're going to provide, on top of the accreditation that is done to you as journalists, we're also going to provide a further accreditation. Without questioning anyone, you come to us and say, I want to be in the rally for the purpose of protection of journalists, not of state media. And I don't recall anywhere where we have abandoned or not talked to state media. We have said to Herald and Zim papers, look, it becomes difficult for us to give an opinion when every time I've told you an example of what is recent, which is factual. Charlton Wendo was interviewed by ZBC. They switched off the audio. They played something and said a totally different story. That is the reality and fact of what happened just a few weeks ago. We have invited, just a few days ago, ZBC was in our press brief that we made. After we have publicly said, Zim papers, come to our rally. Even if you request security, we are prepared to provide you with security because of that kind of ZANU-PF-driven narrative that journalists are harassed in our political rallies. That's not the fact. That's why we've said, as CCC, as a new political organization, because of conscious of some of the challenges that have happened, our mandate as information department in role number one is to protect the media and give them the space, whether they report bad about us or good about us. Our job is to provide them with the platform. And it's very unfortunate that ZANU, and I'm happy that he has put ZANU-PF's position, and I hope that this is the position by their president, Emerson Mnangagwa. This is the position by their spokespersons in their various capacities. That is ZBC, as he has said, and Zim papers have got a political agenda to cover ZANU-PF. That is what he has said.
No, yes, I wanted you to come in to clarify that one. Yes.
First of all, I want us to hold, none of us must raise the temperature. We are not fighting, we are very cool. We are having discourse. I did not say I'm speaking on behalf of ZANU-PF. I said I am a member
of ZANU-PF.
That's all. I am not in the decision making of ZANU-PF. If you want ZANU-PF's position, you go and talk to Chris Mtsangwa. He is the one who's their spokesperson. I'm only a supporter. But it's as a supporter, it is a fact that there has been instances that have been reported in the media of trouble between state media reporters when they go to MDC rallies. But that's not that. I don't want us to waste our time arguing about that. Let's talk about the role of the media in disseminating information in its truthful way. Yes. Is it a true thing that Zim papers get state money, like he says? It's not true. Do you understand? The lack of information or knowledge, Zim papers does not get money. If you look at the budget, there's no money that comes from the budget to pay Zim papers. Do you understand that?
He gets his money from.
I want to correct you again. If you look at the budget, no money was given to ZBC. They must generate their own revenue. It's the state broadcasters.
Subsidized by the state.
They are not subsidized. What I want to say to you, in the budget, no money has been given to ZBC. It's allocated to them. So don't talk about them as if they get state subsidy from. They don't.
They get
so how do they get their money? From probably,
They get adverts. They go out. Zim papers, they get the adverts, and that's how they make their money.
ZTN maybe.
No.
Not ZBC.
All right, let me ZBC as well. They don't make money. And more importantly, we in Zimbabwe can see through what the opposition in this country likes to do. They created newspapers in the private sector to which ZANU-PF members say are parroting their agenda. But we are not going to fight with the private media. We say it's their democratic right to do that. And we are going to say, and they're saying state media supports ZANU-PF. If I was them, like we have done, we found ways of communicating in the private media. They must learn to do the same thing.
Okay.
If in Britain you don't like what the Labour is doing and the media writes about it, you go switch to the Sun.
It sounds to me as if you're saying, before I go to Patience, as if you're saying, as ZANU-PF, you control the state media.
I have not said that.
And when you do so, this is where the complaints are coming.
First of all, as ZANU-PF, we don't control the state media.
Okay.
And I have not said so here.
Yes.
What I am saying is that It's a security risk for any state media to go to an MDC function. The Triple C is...
It's a security...
That's what they say.
That's what ZBC say.
Reporters, that they've been threatened and they would been attacked. That's what they say.
All right.
Okay? And it has been written about. It's not like you are hearing from me. They say that we called them, they don't want to answer back. That's what they say. We, as a member of ZANU-PF, I want to expose Triple C.
Okay.
I want the state media to ask Triple C that you talk that you are a constitutional democracy, and in a constitutional democracy, you go to an election. When you go to an election, if you don't like something that has happened with that election, you go to the electoral court. If you don't like what the electoral court has done, you go to the constitutional court. And once the constitutional court decides, you zip your mouth about that and accept the results. In America, that's how it was. In South Africa, there were electoral disputes, that's how it was. So if you're talking about a constitutional democracy, the last people to talk about a constitutional democracy is Triple C. Because they don't recognize the constitution themselves. So they can't talk about a constitutional democracy to ZANU-PF. They don't.
But again, they say or they complain that these institutions are captured. Let me come to Patience before we respond to that. Patience, here are the issues, and obviously it seems to me that there are practices that the media is expected, the way the media is expected to conduct itself. Would you say, as monitors yourself, the way that the media conducted itself during the by-election is what is expected of them?
Maybe I can just start off with some of the principles and the standards. And as been rightly spoken about, the Constitution is our guiding document for any political party, any person, any media in the country. And Section 61 of the Constitution is very clear around the role of the state media and what the state media is supposed to be, what role it is supposed to play in terms of how it reports. And it is very clear the state media is supposed to be fair, it is supposed to report equitably, it is expected to have editorial independence, and I think that is a very clear concept where editorial independence is really there. It has to be free of influence from anyone, from politics, from business, from any sector of society, so that there is that editorial independence, and it is a principle of the media that we need to be clear about it when we're speaking about what the media is supposed to. The Electoral Act itself is also very clear. In Section 160E to H, I think, is clear around what the media is supposed to do. All media is expected to report in a certain kind of way. It is supposed to report in a way that is equitable, and the Electoral Act is clear around this. It's about equitability. Whether that is interpreted to mean equal is something else, but it has to be equitable. That means that it has to ensure that there is sufficient diversity in terms of how the media, especially the state media, the public media, is reporting around electoral issues. So I think when we are speaking about the role of the media, this is the basis for which we should be able to look at the media and how it has been reporting on elections. In the by-elections that we just went through, we monitored, as media monitors, I'll speak from our perspective, we did monitor different media outlets for the month of March. And while there were differences week on week in terms of what was coming out, we did see those trends where we see that the ZBC does report majority of the time on ZANU-PF. And when we are speaking about ZANU-PF, we do recognize that the state media has a mandate to actually report on the president, on ministers, on government business. And this is not part of the statistics that we carried out. We would only pick out, for example, where the president or where the spokespersons, the ministers, are speaking as members of ZANU-PF and they are identified as such. And that's when you actually realize there is a high percentage of reportage that is actually for ZBC. And when we're looking at ZBC, yes, it did report on smaller political parties, let's just say all the other political parties, whether it's CCC, MDCA, UZA, NPF, there was maybe 1%, 2% of time allocated to these political parties, but you'd find that 70% of the time it was ZANU-PF. And when we look at overall picture in terms of the different the other media outlets that are there was that trend where you found that ZANU-PF was covered pretty much by all media outlets, and not to the same extent. With some media houses, for example, you'd find privately owned newspapers would cover CCC more than they would cover ZANU-PF, but it was almost, there was quite a high percentage of ZANU-PF coverage within the privately owned newspapers. And when you went to radio stations, provincial, national commercial radio stations, very high percentage of ZANU-PF, but there was coverage of other political parties. There was a significant percentage of CCC, MDCA. Yeah. And overall, if you look at the overall picture, what it then says, I think what we need to be looking at as the media is, what are we saying to the public? What we now have is a situation where we have 3 political parties that are taking up the majority of space. Of course, ZANU-PF with the lion's share, and then we've got MDCA and CCC. And so what then are we saying as the media? When we are looking at how we are covering, are we diverse enough? Are we presenting the citizens with enough information for them to be able to make clear decisions around who to vote for, who's participating? As I indicated at the very beginning, that when we're looking at the elections, there was that hype about the party leaders, and the party leaders are coming from these 3 big political parties, and those are the 3 people that we probably thought were contesting and were voting for as citizens, because these are the guys that we see in our media houses overall. So I think as the media, as we're moving forward, the media needs to assess its role. Yes, we might support political parties at an individual level or at a media house level, but what are we saying about your own audience who actually deserve to have the information they need to make decisions that are informed when they are coming into the polling station? So I think pretty much that is what I would say on the matter. So
you say that there was a gap in terms of information, especially looking at the candidates, those who were contesting in the election?
Yes, there was definitely a very big gap. National Assembly candidates were actually fortunate that they were actually covered by most of the media houses. At local government level, I believe for the ward that I'm coming from, I do not remember seeing my councillors, the contesting councillors that were there actually having any space at all in the media, for example. So what exactly are we saying? And I monitor the media every day. What about citizens who do not have that opportunity to be able to go through every platform? You can go through radio, I can go to TV. The ordinary person out there who has to vote in Ward 41 in Marlborough, for example. What exactly are we saying to that person? Who is your candidate? What are their propositions? What exactly, who are the contestants really? So how do you really make a decision if you don't know? Which is a clear role of the media around providing information. And outside the politics, as media, we need to start thinking about the citizens, our audiences, before we start thinking about who do I support, etc., because now we are not playing our role.
Okay, I come to you, Ostallos. Clearly, when we went to Patience, you wanted to respond to what Goodson had said.
I think that he confirms very important things in the politics of this country in relation to media and the ZBC, something that I think that is so revealing, which I think the world of Zimbabwean people were not aware of, myself included, that because on one end he speaks on behalf of ZANU, and on the other he doesn't. But what is clear is, for me,
he is
the following
as a supporter
issues.
Though.
Yeah, here are the following issues. Number one, and I need to help him on the question around Zimbabwe being a constitutional democracy. And for me, Zimbabwe is a de jure constitutional democracy and a de facto one-party state. So the reason why we make complaints about the conduct of the commission, the conduct of the judiciary, is because we are conscious of our moral and constitutional obligation that we must cite. And we do this because it's got a bearing on the stability of the country. So when we say there is a problem with the commission and there is no redress, when we go to the court and the court clearly gives a political judgment, it's something that speaks to the issue that is raising, whether it's Zimbabwe a constitutional democracy. A constitutional democracy is a case not just of the theory or the document that we've got a constitution that is supreme. Are we practicing the constitution? Is the judiciary in this country independent? Is the executive able to respect the legislative arm of government? Definitely not. The legislature in this country cannot hold the executive to account. And that is the basis for us of defining whether Zimbabwe is a constitutional democracy or not. There is no respect of rule of law in this country. There is rule by law in Zimbabwe. So we can't say when we've got a complaint as a contestant in the political processes, we go to the courts and the courts give a political judgment. And ZANU, in his own warped narrative, said that you guys must accept it because you have gone to the court. We are exhausting domestic remedies because we respect the existence of the court. But it doesn't mean that the court is fair in this country. There are plethora of evidence in this country that proves beyond any scientific doubt that the judiciary is not independent in this country. Something which is why we are talking about reforms. Because they are very important so that the judiciary is able to operate outside executive influence in this country. And I want to respond on the question of coverage. I'm happy that my sister has given facts as they are. That 70% of ZBC's coverage were about not the state programs, ZANU-PF, because the problem which is confirming right again about coverage and ZBC's political objective is conflation of ZANU-PF and government. The conflation of ZANU-PF and state institutions, which are supposed to be independent. He's confirming clearly here that there shouldn't be no difference between a constitutionally independent institution and ZANU-PF, which is the predominant problem that we face across the entire problem. If you look at what was happening in our political rallies, the police will say we are not giving you a go-ahead of you to do a political rally. What you would see in the caucus, and I'll give an example of Marondia, in the caucus of the hierarchy of the police office would be a non-ZANU-PF person making the decision whether should we allow them to go ahead or not, which is why we made a political decision as an alternative that ZANU, our political committee, can determine whether we go forward with a rally or not. Because it's clear, it's proven beyond any doubt that the conflation of ZANU-PF and the Zimbabwe Republic Police is a problem in this country, and has got a bearing in terms of having free, fair and credible election. The same as media, that the conflation between a journalist, a reporter of ZBC and a ZANU-PF person, there's no different. Follow them on the internet space. The narrative that directly comes from the political leadership in this country is the same narrative that you get even from government employees. I'll give an example of Nick Mangwana. You want to differentiate between Nick Mangwana and Chris Mutswanga. One is a spokesperson of a political party, the other is a government spokesperson who should be speaking on the agenda and intentions of government, which is a problem.
Let me bring in Goodson. Obviously, Goodson wants to make responses to the issues that you raise. Goodson.
Yeah, I just want to say, like I said, I'm going to be very calm.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems that we have in this country is what kind of an opposition party have we got? What kind? What are we being told by what he has just said? That if next time around Chamisa wins victory over, in the unlikely event, over ZANU-PF, somebody in ZANU-PF must then say, we are politically, we don't think that the election was correct. We go to court, the court says no, Chamisa won. Then we say no, we don't recognize Chamisa ourselves, like they've done. And they are calling themselves a constitutional democracy. In my view, there is something wrong with the constitution that we have. Constitution itself.
Well, what is wrong?
What is wrong with the constitution? That it was drafted for regime change. It was drafted for the opposition. It was paid for by the people who started the movement for democratic change.
How is that?
Let me just explain. I'm going to explain that.
Let's deal with this one.
Yeah.
How do you say that when we know all of us participated in the constitution making process? How does it become that?
Let me tell you. I participated in COPAC on behalf of ZANU-PF.
Yes.
As far as we are concerned, many people in this country believe that the people who funded the constitutional making process were the Western countries, and they put in clauses there that were specifically put in to achieve the following scenario. They funded the opposition newspapers, then they put in a clause also to make sure that even the state media itself was also closed to ZANU-PF, thinking that that is how Zimbabweans, they need a media to see through the emptiness of political agendas that people are correcting in this country. Somebody in Bringa who has never, they listen to Radio Zambia, majority of them, not even here. So they don't need a radio station for them to decide how to go and vote. But if your political party is completely empty, and I'm telling you now, the biggest danger to this constitutional democracy that they think they have is the organization called the CCC. They are the biggest danger to this country. It is a very dangerous organization because everybody understands in the unlikely event that they were ever to get power, we are guaranteed that there will be a civil war in this country.
How is that? How is that? I know, Ostallos, you want to come in, but he has raised an issue that your organization is a danger. I just want him to explain to
how
us
dangerous it is.
How are you saying it's going to lead to a civil war if they win the election?
When Chamisa says at a rally, vote for CCC, within 5 days whites will come back and bring in money. That's a very highly offensive statement. You can't tell.
He has said
investors are white investors. Yeah. Whites will come back. That's I have him on tape, and we'll be playing it for the tape on a daily basis for people to hear what him saying. So,
okay,
that's a very dangerous thing to say, because I'm telling you now, the majority of people in Zimbabwe will never accept a CCC government without a civil war first having been fought. That's what I think.
What is wrong with whites coming to this country? Because I know, for instance, you're a supporter of ZANU-PF, and I know the president has been said we are going on an offensive for re-engagement and engagement with the same people.
There's a perception that the CCC represents a return to Rhodesia if they ever come to power. That is one of the reasons why in Harare here, even though there appear to be more CCC supporters, the majority of them who might not like ZANU-PF decide to stay at home because they understand this issue. And don't think they don't, they do. That the agenda of the CCC is a dangerous agenda. Like I told you earlier on, if the people removed, and he was not here, I want him to hear this. The people who removed Robert Mugabe, they removed him because they said he was about to give this country to people who did not fight in the War of Liberation, one. Two, that they were agents of imperialism, those people that they wanted to give their country to, and they removed Robert Mugabe. And those people have not gone anywhere, they are around.
Okay.
They are around.
Let's give Ostallos an opportunity to respond. You are a dangerous organization. You are going to lead to a civil war in this country if you win the elections.
Look, I was not even supposed to laugh because he makes very dangerous submissions himself. Very unfortunate, but they reflect, as I've said, the position of ZANU-PF. And I think that he speaks clearly what is in the mind and heart of the state president, who is a member of ZANU-PF. And I think that there will be no problem if we equate in the future discourse in the politics of this country the submissions by him as reflections and beliefs by ZANU-PF. Number one, and I hope you allow me to state facts as they are. He talks about a possible war in this country. The 42 years ZANU has been ruling this country without a popular mandate. The question will be that Zimbabwean citizens must be able to know. Let's not talk about what he assumes is going to happen when a CCC government is to take off. Let's talk about what has happened when ZANU-PF has been in government. Thousands of Zimbabweans were killed in Matebeleland in a program supported by government a political agenda by ZANU to create a one-party state. What went down to history as Kukuraundi. Thousands of Zimbabwean people were massacred, brutally killed by ZANU-PF. This is what happened under the watch of ZANU-PF. Number two, thousands of people who belonged to opposition against ZANU to ZAPU were killed and massacred, jailed and tortured by ZANU-PF government. You know of Operation Murambatsina. You know how many people were displaced, killed by ZANU-PF government. You know what happened in 2000. Emerson Mnangagwa said this, and I quote, Mugabe wanted to surrender power to the opposition in 2008, and I personally, as Emerson Mnangagwa, stopped him, subverted a constitutional will of the people. What followed after that? Long sleeve, half-lived. How many people were killed by ZANU-PF, monitored and regulated and supported and deployed by Emerson Mnangagwa? It's on record, he has said it, and we know what happened after that. When he said, I saw Mugabe, don't worry, we are going to deal with it. I'm talking about 42 years of what happened in 42 years. And I want to remind you again of what happened under ZANU-PF government. People were killed in cold blood in 2008 for differing politically with ZANU-PF. You know what happened even to their own political allies in ZANU-PF. He talks about the military coup that they led. They displayed their own members, fired bullets on their houses of their own members in ZANU-PF because of the agenda of political power. He talks about retention. I want to talk about this as the second fact. He talks about investment imperialism. What he doesn't know, that while he's here in front of cameras talking about an anti-imperial agenda, ZANU-PF under Mthuli Ncube is pursuing a private sector-led economy. Is that not ideologically informed by the West? ZANU-PF's open for business agenda is knocking, and I want to quote Mthuli Ncube and Patrick Chinamasa in his days in the Ministry of Finance. He says, if the Bretton Woods institution don't open a door for us, we will keep on knocking, but they are only saviors. What does the Bretton Woods institution represent? They represent the West. They represent white monopoly capital. The agenda that he's talking about of the liberation struggle, and it's very unfair because he himself belongs to the liberation generation, and he knows this as a matter of fact, that most of veterans in this country suffer because of ZANU-PF. Why? ZANU wants to monopolize the liberation agenda. But two things which were critical on the agenda of the liberation struggle, which ZANU has bastardized: the sacrosanctity of the vote. Number two, the land question. We went to the liberation struggle, and by the way, ZANU doesn't have monopoly over the liberation struggle because our own parents fought for the liberation struggle. Do you think that if I was there with my level of political consciousness, if I was there in the liberation struggle, do you think I would have joined the Victoria forces that led this country to independence? Definitely not. But I was not born, and it can't be monopolized to me that I was not part and parcel of the liberation struggle because I was not there. But what I can tell you is that while this is talking about the imperial agenda, while this is talking about the land question, ZANU under Emerson Mnangagwa is giving land back to white people. The reality of the fact which he must be talking about to the people of Zimbabwe is that Zimbabweans, ZANU yakudzosera minda kuvarungu. What they are doing, and allow me to just finish this because it's a very important issue. ZANU in this present moment in time, they are passing land to white people in Chirets. They are passing the land in Manika land. Wherever, go everywhere. You see this land is being passed out to white people, whether they are from the West or the East. They are being given land in this country. Black people don't have land. War veterans are continuously being vetted every day under ZANU-PF government. Why can't we finish the vetting? They use it for political objectives. That's ZANU under Mnangagwa right now. They are pursuing an ideological persuasion of, in fact, ZANU is the greatest right-wing organization in this country. They've gone to the right. The liberation struggle was informed by the left, Marxist-Leninist ideological persuasion. But under Mnangagwa, ZANU is to the extreme right. He knows this for a fact. He knows that the RPZ in this country has been used to facilitate right-wing neoliberal political economic agenda. In this country that we are talking about, that's the economic reality.
Let's allow him to come back to respond to these issues. That
okay.
But before you do that, because I feel that patience, obviously, the discussion here is diverted a little bit. We're focusing
not a little bit, quite a lot.
Quite a lot, because we're looking at the media, the role the media is playing, and in covering the election, in informing the people. But there is a point that he raised, that people in the periphery of the country, at the borders, they don't have access to TV or radio. They actually listen to radio stations from other countries. What does that say as media monitors? What does that say when we look at the right of people to have access to information?
Problematic, of course. It's definitely a problematic situation that we have, but it also points to some of the structural difficulties we have in terms of our media in Zimbabwe, where we see that there are quite a number of problems in terms of how we have actually tried to ensure that there is diversity and access of the media by all people in Zimbabwe. I will just take broadcasting, for example. We recently saw the licensing of community radio stations. Within that whole process of licensing community radio stations, this is where, as a first step, we were actually supposed to start seeing these communities being granted the right to be able to speak for themselves, to have radio licenses given to these communities. Unfortunately, the challenge that we have is around how do we identify who is applying. Have we actually given capacity to people in different communities to be able to apply for community radio licenses so that they can be able to speak about their own issues? That is one challenge itself in terms of access. The second is really around what provisions have we put for community radio stations, for example, to be able to broadcast. One of the big issues is around politics, where they have there is a provision in the Act that community radio stations, and this includes campus radio stations that have been given licenses as well, cannot delve into any issues around politics. And that is already problematic. At what point are you going to say, are you going to talk about politics or talk about elections and start this? At what point? I think it's just a very problematic proposition that we have in terms of ensuring that citizens have the access that they need to the information they need, especially around electoral issues. But like you said, yes, there is that problem. The citizens do not have access. ZBC itself, while it has the highest it's the most accessible, has the most accessible signal around the country, still does not cover all the areas that it needs to cover. And I think this is also something that we need to consider when we are looking at what the role of ZBC is. Being that station that has the highest coverage, it must have at least that moral obligation to ensure that everyone is covered, to ensure that everyone has the information that they need. And that also requires them to be fair in terms of how they're presenting issues and propositions, in terms of how they are just pushing different agendas to ensure that we are pushing more around development for our own communities, in terms of what the people actually need. So this means no to partisan politics, for example. On ZBC, we just have to ensure that we are fair in our coverage, we are equitable in terms of how we present issues for everyone. And it's not just a matter of political parties that is a challenge. We also have an issue around, for example, coverage of women who are in politics, for example. And we see that very few of the women candidates got a lot of space. Yes, we found that where you had space, that women are speaking around political issues, it was a lot around the leaders of political parties or spokespersons of political parties, and not the candidates themselves. And this is across the board from any political party. So women themselves, especially women candidates, definitely have a need to be seen, to be heard out there, and they should be invested in actually ensuring that there is that equitability we are talking about, because it's not just about which political party do you belong to. It means which demographic group do you belong to. If you are below 36, the chances of you getting quoted in the media, if you're not Mr. Siziba, is very limited, for example. If you're a woman, the chances are low as well. So we need to, I think as a society, we just need to be invested to ensure that there is enough diversity for everyone to have a space and to have a say on what they want to see on their national broadcaster.
Because I don't want this debate to take a detour, we want to come back to the media and say the issues that she is raising really are critical issues, to say that the space is not fair.
Yeah, now, this is very important for me to say this. In Binga, they don't read state media, Zim papers. In Binga, they can just about get ZBC, but they listen to radio in Zambia. So, for the people who are in that area, the media plays no part in their decision making about anything. But what matters to them is the various agendas of the various political players.
Already they have a right that is being violated.
No. They have a right, yes. I'm saying they have a right. But you know what? The people who are trying to hype this thing, role of the media, like I'm trying to tell you, it is for regime change. That's the reason why it is impossible for them, so that when they write their lies about fake abductions, it must be written in the paper to say that Mamombe was abducted, which was not abducted. So they need that in the media, but that is the basis on which, the first basis on which they seek to come to power. So when anybody is sitting in any newsroom, he looks at the MDC linked to opposition and saying, what is the general agenda there? I'm a Zimbabwean. I've not been told by anybody to support the agenda of the opposition that we have in this country. That's why I said it is a very dangerous opposition, because of the capacity for them to move the British Lords, House of Parliament in Britain, to make things about them. They don't talk about anything that happens in Africa. It's only about here. They are agents of imperialism masquerading as politicians. That is why they are dangerous. That's why they are going to lead our country to a deadly civil war.
So you say the people in those areas must not have
access
to media?
I didn't say that. What I am saying is that the media is not the be it and all of the rights of fundamental. The rights of fundamental of Zimbabweans is as fundamental as someone in America and Britain saying, we will impose sanctions on you until you vote for the MDC. That is the intimidation of the highest order, and the people in Zimbabwe will not have it. They will not allow a party that we are being forced by Britain and America to vote for to take the levers of state power. Because we are being intimidated, that we are being told that if you don't vote for MDC, and the MDC is saying so, that if you vote for us, the Americans and British will bring money here, there will be no more sanctions anymore. They're forcing us to buy into a Rhodesian agenda set up by the Rhodesians who set up the movement for democratic change long before he grew up, because he's a young man. He was not there. Now, what I'm trying to say to you, and what I'm saying to you, is very, very important. You must ask yourself, those people who removed Robert Mugabe, are they still around?
I want to help.
Again, like I said, yes, you're going to respond to that. But I'm trying to make sure that our discussion focuses on the media and the role that the media plays in terms of informing people on who to elect. Yes.
We're the only African country, and I'm happy that my old man wants us to stay in the lines of facts. Number one, we're the only African country with one television station. They pride themselves to be liberation struggle. They are liberation fighters across the African continent.
But let's correct this, Ostallos.
Yes.
If you say we are the only country with one TV station, we have had other stations being licensed just recently, and we have other stations that...
you know, I'm talking about the main broadcaster. We have one, ZBC. You can't access it. He talked about how these other TV stations are there across the country. They are not there. We're talking about boosters. Is it a state media? The answer is no. We can't be proud as a liberation country which was liberated against imperialism. We can't be proud of saying people in Binga don't have access to state media. We can't be proud of that. And it's an indictment. It's an indictment on the failure of ZANU-PF, which masquerades as the people who liberate this country are war liberators, not the ZANU-PF. It's the which our parents were part and parcel of the liberation forces. That's one. Number two, I want to help my old man here. It's very unfortunate because they deployed him to be writing propaganda on behalf of ZANU. Do you know where these people are right now? They've got money, their money stashed in Swiss accounts in the Western countries. While they are giving him a salary in RTGS.
And when you say these people, you mean...
the ZANU-PF elites, which is defending. The elite in ZANU-PF are actually in Europe. Do you know what they are doing? They were exposed during the one of these international summits, buying champagne. He was here writing Zim papers. It's very unfortunate, but they are abusing the old man. They are actually, they've got houses in Principe in France. They've got houses in Washington DC. They've got houses in the Western countries.
This is the reason why we
the
can't
people,
have these people.
and allow me to. I want to help people. The old man here, which is while he's defending ZANU-PF, they actually, let me tell you, one of the people who is at the center of corruption in this country is from the West Z. He's got the guy has bought national companies like National Foods. He's bought Simbisa, Bekazin. He's at the center of 7 heights of corruption in this country.
Let me say, because we are coming to the end of the program, Ostallos.
He's here defending them, which is very unfortunate. And I want to remind him as a last point.
Ostallos.
Allow me to respond to him as a last point.
Give me a last point.
I want to respond him to help him.
Yeah.
And I want to remind him, it is the labor movement in this country
Yes.
and the students' union which called the whole veterans and said, look, the willing buyer, willing seller program, which you signed for in the Lancaster House, the resolution, is not sufficient to address the landed question in this country. These war veterans, after we gave them political consciousness and reminded them of what was at the agenda of the liberation struggle, took to the streets and marched against Mugabe. One of their inscriptions in the placards, and I know he's a historian, was, we throned you, we can dethrone you. Who informed the veterans? It was at the University of Zimbabwe. Was there ZANU-PF? No. Mugabe then came in.
Let's come to the end of this program, Ostallos.
To push the willing buy, willing seller program, anti-it with the fast track land reform. So
let's do this,
his
Ostallos.
political consciousness has escaped him.
I want us to deal with
forgetting recent historic events that happened 2 decades ago.
All right.
It is us who came with the agenda. And as I conclude,
so you have been complaining. You have been complaining.
And the present young has actually went back to the Lancaster resolution to say, no, let us compensate white farmers. Let us go back to the Lancaster resolution. They've confirmed it, that we want to go back to the Lancaster resolution of paying back white people.
Let's deal with the last question, Ostallos, and I'll start with you as we are wrapping up. That clearly we have seen that media plays an important role in informing people, and especially the marginalized. What, with the complaints that you've been making as a political party, what is it that you think needs to be done to ensure that people have access to
I think that
information?
we need reform. We need proper reform in this country. Media reforms are very important so that the media is able to cover every political organization. I don't speak just on behalf of the CCC movement. I think that media must be able to cover ZANU-PF, MDC, Mavambo Gusile Don, Linda Masare, Kisnos Mukwaji, and everyone else, so that people in Zimbabwe, the media plays a critical role, which he tries to undermine in terms of putting ideas into the political market. Because the danger of not having political contestation is that route that is talking, the route of instability, the route of stress, of terror. Let us defeat each other at the level of ideas, on superior logic. Let the party with superior ideas, because our difference with ZANU as our competitor is about how best can we transform the lives of ordinary people in this country. Nothing else.
Let me come to you, Goodson. Obviously,
the media in this country is doing fine.
Okay.
The people who are not happy with the media in this country are people who are the agents of imperialism.
Okay.
And the agents of imperialism in this country are represented by the MDC. That is why they took such a heavy beating in this last election. They lost seats to ZANU-PF. They didn't take one seat from ZANU-PF. And let me tell you something for next year, and it's good for you that you are going to hear this from me. Next year, you are going to get a serious hiding, because there are 35,000 villages here. We are not going to allow a situation that has been there, that people in the rural areas walk 15 kilometers to a polling station to go and vote. We want the distance to a polling station to be the same, somebody who lives in Highfields and who lives in a rural area. Every rural area person must have an election. There must be a vote, a polling station in every village.
So the media is doing fine. I will not allow you to go there. It's a discussion for another day. Patience, yes, what is it that we need to do?
I think there are several things that we need to do as a country. First of all, we need to abide by the Constitution. The Constitution, I think, is a document that guides us as a country in terms of how the media is supposed to be operating. And this Constitution was something that we all voted yes to, and I think we need to respect that as a country. We need to also ensure that we are following the law. The letter and the spirit of the law. What is the spirit that the law was made to ensure that everyone has access to information, there is equitability, there is diversity, and ultimately we have democratic processes thriving in this country. So following the election, the laws, including the Electoral Act. And lastly, I think that with the Electoral Commission, it has that mandate, and one of its roles is really to ensure that coverage by the media is non-biased, it is fair, it is equitable, it is accurate. And I think it is important for ZEC to ensure that it has mechanisms in place that actually ensure that they can be able to handle complaints, for example, and they can be able to resolve any complaints that the public has, and them proactively ensuring that the law is being followed by the different radio stations, by the different media houses that are there, as well as ensuring that the political parties themselves are behaving in a certain way, especially when we are looking at issues such as hate speech. So I think that is what we can be able to think about as we are going forward.
Let me take this opportunity to say thank you so much to Patience, thank you to Ostallos, and thank you to Goodson for your time and the insights that you brought us. I want to say thank you to our viewers as well. This is at the beginning of a series of programs where we say in countdown to 2023 media and communication lessons from the by-elections. We're going to be looking at a number of issues with regards to media and elections. Have a good day.